My name is Adam Cole, and I'm 28 years old. A few weeks ago, I moved to a small town called Baxter Springs in Kansas. I had landed a new job nearby and found a cozy, affordable apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was quiet, and that's what I needed after living in a bustling city for years. The landlord, Mr. Davis, was an older man in his late 60s. He was polite but distant. He seemed a bit odd. The day I moved in, Mr. Davis gave me a tour of the apartment. It was a small one-bedroom unit with everything I needed, except there was this basement door in the hallway that stood out. It had a heavy, rusted lock on it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked about it. He looked at me with a stern expression and said, "The basement's unsafe. Don't go down there, Adam." I mean it. It struck me as strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone's got their quirks, right? I figured maybe it was old, damp, or had bad wiring. Nothing worth investigating. That changed after a few nights. Late at night, I started hearing noises coming from the floor beneath me. At first, I thought it might be the building settling or pipes rattling. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just creaks or groans. It was scratching, like fingernails clawing at something. And whispers, so faint that I could barely make out the words, but there was definitely someone speaking. I kept telling myself it was in my head, just my imagination running wild, but the sounds kept getting louder. More desperate. I tried to ignore it for days, shoving headphones into my ears at night, drowning out the noises with music. But it didn't help. My curiosity and fear were gnawing at me. One evening, the sounds got so intense that I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know what was down there. It was around 11 p.m., and I knew Mr. Davis wouldn't be around, so I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and went to the basement door. The lock was old and rusted, probably hadn't been changed in decades. It took a few hits with the hammer, but I managed to break it off. The door creaked open, and an overwhelming stench hit me. Damp, moldy air mixed with something I couldn't quite place. It was dark, but I had my phone's flashlight, so I descended the stairs slowly, feeling the walls close and around me as I went deeper. The basement was cold. Not just chilly, it was freezing. My breath was visible in the dim light. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I felt something brush against my leg. I jumped, my heart racing, but it was just a cobweb. I kept moving forward, shining the light around. That's when I saw him. In the corner of the room, chained to the wall, was a man. He was emaciated, his skin pale and sickly, his eyes wide with fear. He looked like he hadn't seen daylight in years. His clothes were tattered, hanging off his bones like rags. "Help me," he whispered, his voice shaking. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. Who was this man? Why was he here? Then it hit me. This was real. He was real. Who are you? I managed to stammer, moving closer. "My name is Michael," he rasped. "I've been down here for years. Please, you have to help me." He was trembling violently, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. I knelt down beside him, trying to unfasten the chains. They were old and rusty, but they wouldn't budge. Before I could think of another way to free him, I heard the floorboards creak above us. My heart sank. Mr. Davis. I spun around just as the basement door slammed shut, and there he was, standing at the top of the stairs. In his hand was a knife, long and glinting in the dim light. His expression was twisted, a sick grin spreading across his face. "You shouldn't have come down here, Adam," he said quietly, his voice dripping with menace. "I warned you." I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline kicking in. Michael whimpered behind me, pleading for help, but I couldn't fight Mr. Davis head-on. I rushed towards the stairs, knocking over some old shelves as I went, trying to create a barrier between us. Mr. Davis lunged forward, the knife slicing through the air, but I managed to dodge him and sprint up the stairs. I slammed into the door with all my weight, forcing it open, and bolted out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the street, gasping for breath. I called the police, of course, but by the time they arrived, Mr. Davis and the man in the basement were gone. The apartment was empty, the basement completely cleared out. There was no trace of anyone having ever been down there. I moved out the next day. I'll never forget what I saw. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the scratching, the whispers, and I wonder if Michael is still down there, somewhere, trapped in the darkness, waiting for someone else to hear his cries for help.